Hi, my name is Nicolette, and I'm testifying on Theyovercomeby. To start my testimony off, I guess I'm going to start where it all started. Was probably when I was 14 years old. I had a pretty good childhood. I was raised up in a church. I had a really good family. They loved me and they took care of me. For a lot of my younger years, I was homeschooled. So when I turned like 12 or 13, we ended up moving to Huntsville, to a city, and we started going to, at first was a Christian school, but we started going to we were around other kids and in the public, and I started getting into trouble then. I started working at Chick-fil-A and hanging around a lot of people that were older than me. They started getting involved in, different kinds of drugs. Some of them were not very bad at that time. They're all bad, but at that time it was not bad compared to what I've done. But they started getting involved in, drinking and smoking weed and different things like that. So I started getting familiar with seeing that in my friends and around me. And a lot of times I would just kind of stay right on the outskirts of what everybody else was doing and hang around them, but never actually really do anything. I would kind of dabble in it a little bit, but I guess when it really all started, my sister was, one day I was at work, and I was met by two police officers who came in, and they asked me if I had a sister named Jessica, and I told them I did, and they told me that there had been a car accident, and my sister Jessica had been killed in a car accident. It devastated me. She was 19, I was 17, and she was my best friend. And, all those friends that I had around that I never really dabbled in what they dabbled in, they were right there to help me, of course, in my moment of despair, if you want to call it help. And 3 days after my sister died in a car accident, I actually was sticking a needle of crystal meth in my arm, and that was how I first started into my 7 years of crazy, I like to call it. Crystal meth was, at first, my primary drug of choice. Crystal meth destroyed my life. For probably a year I was on crystal meth, maybe a little less. I was really using any way that I could. I ended up getting involved in a lot of things. I got kicked out of my house, of course. Nobody really wanted me around. I didn't have a job. I couldn't keep a job. So I had to start, doing illegal things to even get money or get drugs. And I ended up getting into a lot of things like organized crime. I was making barcodes, making fake receipts. I was going to different places like Walmart and Lowe's, and I was manufacturing these receipts and then going in and stealing product for stuff that I never bought in the first place. We would just walk out the door with it, and I would do that, and then I would get the product and I would go sell it to get more drugs. And there was a lot of violence in the crystal meth world. People had gotten shot in our front yard. I was living in such fear and paranoia. I couldn't go anywhere. If anyone walked in the room even with their hands in their pockets or anything, I would freak out thinking they were going to shoot me or stab me. I was really, truly beginning to lose my mind on crystal meth and just doing a lot of horrible things on it. So I realized real quick, crystal meth might not exactly be the drug for me. So I decided that I was going to try to get off crystal meth. I knew I had to get off that stuff. So after 9 months of crazy things going on that, I moved to Atlanta. I had a good friend that helped me detox. I'd never detoxed off of anything in my life. It was a horrific experience, and thankfully the Lord got me out of the crystal meth scene. And that kind of starts the second phase of my testimony. I was doing really good in Atlanta. I moved and distanced myself away from everybody that I knew and everything that I knew that was involved with drugs. And I was doing good for about 3 months, And also I want to say that during that time before I moved, I cried out to God. I always had a relationship with God, and God in His faithfulness, He always was there for me. Every time, that I cried out to Him, He never left me. He always was there for me. So I cried out to God. I said, God, please help me. I know I'm in trouble. And of course He was there, and He moved me. So for 3 months I'm doing good. I'm praying every day, serving God again. Serving God for the most part. But I thought I was in love with this boy, and it turned out to be the second nightmare of my addiction life. I moved back home to Huntsville, Alabama, and I ended up going to live with this man who was a lot older than me, who was involved heavily in drugs. I managed to stay out of the drugs when I was with him. I thought I was doing good there, but he ended up being pretty abusive. He actually was very abusive. It started off pretty good at first. Over the course of a couple months, he started getting very jealous, very protective of me. We would go out, and he would notice maybe other guys would start staring at me, or he perceived they were. And he ended up getting very violent and very abusive. He actually started, he wouldn't take me anymore, so he had this little bitty box. I mean, we were so broke and poor because he was selling drugs and just a nobody, that he had this, I call it a box. It was a pull-behind trailer that we were living in. It had no running water, no bathroom, and he would leave me locked up in this box for days at a time while he would go out and get high because he didn't want anyone messing with me, and he would bolt lock me in this thing. And when he would come home, he would unlock all 3 bolts and still be convinced that I snuck out and cheated on him, and he would proceed to be very abusive and beat me. And I tolerated that for a very long time. I would leave the situation, but I always, for some reason, felt like I was in love with him and that he really loved me, which is crazy, and I would go back. One of the times that I went back while I was gone, he ended up buying a gun. And when I went back that time, I knew, I was like, if I don't get out of this and for real stay out of it, he's going to kill me. He's going to try to scare me with the gun and accidentally shoot me, or he's really just going to shoot me in his paranoia. So once again, I cried out to God, and I said, God, if you can please help me, just get out of this. I don't know how to get out of it. I'm afraid, I don't know what to do. And once again, God, being as faithful as he is, he came and he rescued me one more time, and he pulled me out of that situation. He used my mom to help. She didn't have nothing to do with me really at that time, but she was there when I needed her. And she hid me out in a hotel because he knew where I lived, so he wouldn't be able to find me for a while, and then moved me back home. So like my pattern seemed to be, I did good for a while, and I would eventually just start going back into things. When I got home from Shane, I was very broken and I was very hurt, but something switched in my head. I flipped one day, and I just got very angry and very bitter. I was very confused. I started getting a lot of fights with my family. I started getting in a lot of altercations with my sister, actual fist fights. I started self-medicating with, instead of, the hard drugs, instead of just weed and stuff, I started getting opiates and benzos, anything I could really get my hand on, alcohol, and I was just going down a vicious cycle. Of course, I couldn't afford these pills that I was taking, so I started working in the clubs. I ended up working in strip clubs and getting involved in a lot of pushing drugs and things like that. And that went on for a while. I just was very crazy. I started robbing people. I just was living just this wild life with no care for anybody. I was just ruining relationships. Anybody that did love me and want to help me, I would destroy them. I would destroy their cars. I would destroy their homes. I just had such anger and I was so hurt, and I didn't know what to do with it all. So towards the end of that phase of, I guess what you can call my addictions, I knew I needed help. I knew that I was mentally not well. I knew that I was starting to get very bad depression, and I knew that I was just destroying my family. And I knew that God would help me. The last 2 times I'd called on God, he was always there. But I also knew that I probably didn't have many more chances with God. So I was like, I don't want to call him this time because I'm not quite ready to give up what I wanted to give up. I knew that what God was requiring of me was a holy life, and I didn't want to blow my last chance with God. Not that there is, but at that time, that's what I was thinking. So I decided that I was going to self-help again, and I was going to go see a Christian psychologist and get on prescription medication.